Another key meeting that the Prime Minister held was with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau today, as I mentioned, where the Khalistani threat was raised. But post the meeting, the message from the Canadian Prime Minister was virtually the same as he has made before, that they believe in freedom of speech and peaceful protests, but will also not allow violence. Now, the issue is if Canada has been true to that message. India, of course, in the past has talked about how domestic political compulsions have allowed K sympathizers to not just grow, but also thrive in Canada, often using not just threatening gestures or descending into violence, but also, for example, issuing actual death threats against Indian diplomats. So those are in conflict with the spirit of justice that the Canadian Prime Minister has talked about. Along with that, Trudeau also added that rule of law and foreign intervention was also raised in this meeting. So what was the message that was the message from the Canadian Prime Minister enough or not? First, let's listen in to what Justin Trudeau said.
They both came up over the years with Prime Minister Modi. We've had many conversations on both of those issues. Obviously, Canada will always defend freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, freedom of peaceful protest. That's something that's extremely important to us. At the same time as we're always there to prevent violence, to push back against hatred. I think on the issue of the community, it's important to remember that the actions of the few do not represent the entire community or Canada. The flip side of it, we also highlighted the importance of respecting the rule of law, and we did talk about foreign interference.
Gurjeet Singh, former ambassador of India to countries like Germany and the African Union, continues to be with us. Also, Terry Milewski is author and Canadian journalist. He has, of course, done a lot of work on the Khalistani movement. Terry, let me begin with you. What did you make of the Canadian Prime Minister's message? Was it strong enough, or is he again saying the same things that we've heard from Canada before?
Well, he's dancing around it. He's doing a little better than he did in the past. At least he is taking the issues seriously and nodding to Indian concerns. But he's trying not to give up ground by saying anything too provocative about the Khalistani forces in Canada, to which he has, like most Canadian parties, in fact, been pandering lo these many years. It seems to me that reading between the lines of what Trudeau said, that he is telling Indians that we're prepared to listen to your concerns about the actions of the few, meaning the few, the small minority of extremists that are provoking this trouble between India and Canada. But don't blame me. I respect freedom of speech. They're allowed to wave flags and shout Khalistan Zindabad. In Canada, that's freedom of speech. It's not against the law in Canada, and we're not going to ban that. So we're not going to back up any further. We're not going to abolish freedom of speech in order to please India. But he has been forced back on his heels to say, look, we're going to take your concerns more seriously. But as a practical matter, how he does that is the question going forward. I mean, the Indians are at this stage, they've had enough of Canada's games on this question, and they're not going to back up. I don't think Prime Minister Modi or any of his officials going to give up on this just because Trudeau has made a few mild statements that, yeah, we're listening to your concerns. I think they will continue to push. I think the trade talks will continue to be in trouble until Canada gives a much clearer signal in terms of, look, we're not going to tolerate painting targets on the backs of Indian diplomats by suggesting they are killers. We are not going to tolerate our MPs in our party anyway going to Baisakhi parades where they display pictures of mass murdering martyrs and a tableau of the assassination
of
Indira Gandhi, for example. We're going to keep our eye on that for sure.
Terry and Gurjeet Singh, just stay with me. I just want to, for the benefit of our viewers, talk about the visuals that we're getting. These are visuals of the Indian Prime Minister kind of taking a lap of honor, if I may term it that. Certainly, it's been a joyous 2 days and a successful 2 days for the Prime Minister and the entire government, with the whole of government approach and the wonderful conduct of the G20 summit in the national capital. So these are live visuals coming in from the Bharat Mandapam, where the Prime Minister is kind of doing a bit of a waving to the media contingent and others. We were told there could be an informal, small talk, a chat, appreciation exchanged with the media, both Indian and the foreign media, that has, of course, covered the G20 summit, making it a success as well. The Bharat Mandapam itself has been quite a success and almost unprecedented the way India has managed to host an international level event of this stature and this scale in the country. And even as we keep those visuals on our screen, I want to quickly also bring in Gurjeet Singh on the issue of Canada. These are words that we're discussing, of course, of the Canadian Prime Minister. He said what he said. I'm sure behind closed doors, India would have had, things to say too. And do you feel the Indian government would have once again, they've said it, for example, External Affairs Minister has said it in public about the domestic political support that Khalistani sympathizers get in Canada for reasons they best know. But do you think behind closed doors, India has the heft to impress upon Canada even more today?
So 3 quick points. The bilateral with Trudeau was held only for this purpose, to tell him that what he is doing is inadequate and unacceptable. Had this not been an issue, I don't think a bilateral with Trudeau would even have taken place. The fact that we had that bilateral shows how important this issue is to us. Second, Trudeau does not understand fringe politics. He is allowing a lunatic fringe to become mainstream and still thinks it's a fringe. Now, this understanding really needs to change. Thirdly, Trudeau is putting a relationship with India, which you can see a rising, emerging India, at stake purely for his own political future, which he believes is dependent on these people in his country. Yes, let them have freedom of speech, but let them not attack people of India.
Yes.
Let them do whatever they want in Canada. But you cannot come and threaten India like this. Then you should be prepared for appropriate retaliation.
Okay, Terry, you talked about what practical steps will the Canadian government take. And, you mentioned, of course, how diplomats have been targeted with death threats, with posters that are being released with impunity, seriously. And all we saw, for example, when that happened, and you discussed it with CNN News 18 at that time as well, was that a little bit of the security of the diplomats was increased. Now, that's not going to cut it. That's not going to, be okay for India anymore. That has had much better support from London and much better support from Australia on the issue of Khalistani sympathizers. Do you feel that there could be pressure mounting at all on the Canadian government to do more? And if so, what is it that they could do?
Yes, I think that pressure is mounting now as a result of there will be some post-mortems on this G20 summit, with Trudeau relegated to having this brief 10-minute pull-aside meeting. Okay, well, we'll agree to meet with you at the G20, but make it quick. That's the tone of the relationship now between Modi and Trudeau. Not very healthy, really. And the issue now that you're raising is the real issue. What actual action will Canada take? For example, last time around we discussed the killer posters, labeling Indian diplomats as killers in the assassination of Mr. Nijjar out in British Columbia. Well, at the time, the Foreign Minister Melanie Joly made a fine statement saying this is unacceptable. These posters are unacceptable. And what did Canada do? Canada accepted them. The very next day, after saying they were unacceptable, we allowed them to be carried, those posters, to be carried through the streets of downtown Toronto and Vancouver. So we didn't do anything about it. We didn't go to the municipal authorities and say, why are you giving a parade permit to these people to carry these? Well, let's think of ways we can fight back and do more. Look at what Rishi Sunak did, for example. All he did was make a statement that, look, there is no space for extremism in Britain. Now, if we heard the same language from Trudeau, it wouldn't cost him very much, but it could achieve a great deal. It did very well for Rishi Sunak, did it not? It became a hero in India. Well, why can't Trudeau say, look, these people have gone too far, we're going to stop this, we're going to act, and that would sound pretty good in India, wouldn't it?
Okay.
But so far, we still haven't taken even that rhetorical step, and India is going to want to see practical steps in addition to the rhetorical.
Yes, and when Canadian Prime Minister talks about rule of law, certainly he also means that the death threats of the kind we've seen or the glorification of the assassination of an Indian Prime Minister does not fall in the permit of a peaceful protest with the right message or rule of law. Gurjeet Singh ji, final minute left. A very quick question about the Canadian complaints of government, foreign government intervention that they keep piling on India. Of course, Justin Trudeau was quick to also slip in the fact that they raised this with India. What's happening here?
I wonder what's happening. Because I think if you are going to use the Indian diaspora for your political ends, please remember that India also has a reach into the diaspora. And therefore, as I mentioned earlier, there would be counter-reaction.
Yes.
But I think my co-panelist, the journalist from Canada, I think his government needs to listen to him more. He seems to understand the situation quite clearly.
Well, he's quite an expert on the Khalistani movement in Canada. Terry, any final words? Very quickly, please.
Yeah.
Well, I would simply say watch what Trudeau does, not what he says.
Absolutely.
Does he take action to stop these people and to make them think twice before parading through the streets with a tableau of the assassination of Indira Gandhi? That has to be unacceptable in practice, not just in rhetoric.
Absolutely. And the relationship between India and Canada could well be at stake. So that is a realization that the Canadian authorities should have. Gurjeet Singh and Terry Milliscu, thanks a lot for sparing your time and joining us.